Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. For today's video, I wanted to try something different. So I'm doing another reading vlog challenge video concept thing. So you've already read the title of this and you're probably feeling about the words I chose to use. Reading books with fat girl protagonists. Now, I am a fat girl myself. That is just a fact. I know this about myself. I recognize it every time I see my reflection or photos or video. I am aware of this. It is just a fact. It is a descriptor of my body type. For some reason, it's an insult. It is only ever used as an insult. And as such, when I describe myself as fat, everybody jumps up and goes, no, you're not fat, don't say that about yourself. And I'm like, I'm not blind. You acting like that makes me think it's a bad thing. Are we not supposed to be living in an era of body positivity? So as a avid reader, I read a lot, I am increasingly aware of the lack of representation of different body types in books. Everybody kind of fits into this same stock person. They are usually slightly on the shorter side because they have to be shorter than their male love interest, and naturally slender or slightly athletically built. There are instances of other body types being, welcomed into the world of literature. It's just that on average, that is your female physique. It's a whole other conversation for male physique, and it's honestly also a problem. But what I am doing in this video is addressing the problem of female body types in books. As a fat girl, I want to be reading books where there are fat girl protagonists. I want to read about fat girls saving the world and fat girls falling in love and getting the guy. I want to see myself represented in these storylines, in these plot arcs, and I'm not. I have the benefit of being white, heterosexual, and cisgendered. There are plenty of books about white straight girls. I'm aware of this. However, there are not that many books about fat girls in love and fat girls saving the day, and I really just want to see that. I feel like I deserve that. As someone who engages with so many stories, it's really quite sad that I don't see it more often. I'm very comfortable with my body. I think I look great. I know not everyone thinks I look great, but it doesn't really matter what I look like. Not everyone's gonna think I look great. Everybody has a different opinion on everybody. I like myself. I like my body. That's all that really matters in that regard. However, I know that is not the case for everybody, and a lot of people struggle to find beauty in themselves, and something that can really help with that is seeing fictional characters who look like you being loved by other people and still being able to do all the things and have all the experiences and not having that locked into a specific type of person. So for today's video, I am only reading books with fat girl protagonists for a week. I have 4 books here in a variety of genres. It's not as varied as I would like it, but that being said, there are only so many genres that I actually really enjoy anyway. And I specifically wanted to pick out books that I thought I would enjoy, because otherwise what's the point? I'm just gonna run through them with you. First up, I have an adult romance, Teach Me by Olivia Dade. This is the first book in the There's Something About Marysburg series. I've read a book by this author before, spoiler alert, by Olivia Dade, and I really loved the fat rep in this book. If you're here looking for recommendations on books with fat protagonists, read this one. It's good. So I know I really enjoy this author, and I know they do a good job of writing fat main characters. So I wanted to pick up another one of her books, and I've wanted to for a while. I love this cover. One thing I do want to say is with every single book I have today, the fat girl protagonist is on the book cover, and that makes me so happy because it's just, they're not hiding the fact that these characters are bigger people, it's right there on the cover. You can't pretend you don't know. So I really appreciate that. This is our protagonist here. So in this book we follow a woman named Rose who works at a school, and a new colleague is hired named Martin, and she's really not impressed because he's given the class that she really wants and really cares about. So she's kind of not impressed with him. It says in the synopsis that she finds it hard to keep her distance from him and to keep like being real cold towards him because he's really kind and warm and has his own insecurities and doesn't value himself, and so she wants to teach him to value himself. It says Rose has her own lessons about trust, about vulnerability, about her past to learn, and over the course of a single school year the two of them will find out just how hot it can get when an ice queen melts. I'm intrigued to read this. I do really enjoy seeing fat girl protagonists as the lead in a love story because you never see that. Fat bodies are never shown in a sexual light. It's not terribly long. It's only 261 pages, so I think I'll be able to read this pretty quickly, especially because it's an adult romance book. They tend to go by pretty fast for me. Next up I got Fat Chance Charlie Vega by Crystal Maldonado. I think that's how you say that name. This is a young adult contemporary novel following Charlie. She's in high school. It says Charlie Vega is a lot of things. Smart, funny, artistic, ambitious, fat. People sometimes have a problem with that last one, especially her mom. So Charlie has a really tough relationship with her mom, who's kind of always on her case. Lose weight, you can lose weight, just lose some weight. There's one thing to encourage someone to lose weight if they ever show interest in it, and to encourage people to engage with healthy habits. There is another thing to shame someone and make someone feel awful about themselves in an effort to make them change. That's not fun and not helpful. So she has a bit of a rough relationship with her mum. She also kind of has the double whammy of being a person of color, which means society also has a lot of opinions about that because people suck. But there's one person who Charlie always feels comfortable around and feels like they're in her corner, and that is her best friend Amelia, who is all the things Charlie is not. Slim, popular, athletic, and then Charlie starts a tentative relationship with a classmate named Brian, only to find out that he asked Amelia out first. And oh wow, would that be a hit to the confidence. I can only imagine if that had happened to me in high school, I would have felt awful. It says, so is she his second choice or what? Does he even really see her? Because it's time people did. It says this book tackles our relationships to our parents, our bodies, our cultures, and ourselves. So this is kind of like a coming of age, coming into oneself, self-acceptance, self-love story, while also having a bit of romance trickling through. I think reading about a fat girl in high school will be an interesting thing. The next book I have here is A Darkened Stylus Forest by Sarah Hollowell, which is a fantasy book with a fat girl protagonist, which honestly that makes me very excited because this is the only one on this list that isn't contemporary or realistic fiction, I guess I should say. There's something different when you put people in a fantasy setting or a sci-fi setting. It feels different. So this is a book, shocking, following Derry. There's something in the forest and it's angry, violently angry. Derry and her 8 siblings live in an isolated house by the lake, separated by the rest of the world by an eerie and menacing forest. The world isn't safe for people with magic. That's why they're separated. Oh, so they're all magical. Then one night her eldest sister disappears and a second sibling goes missing not long after. Feeling safe, not so much anymore. So Derry will risk anything to protect the family she has left, even if that means returning to the forest that has started calling to Derry in her missing siblings' voices. The more time she spends there, the more powerful her magic grows, and the darkness inside her, the viciousness she wants to pretend doesn't exist. But saving her siblings from the forest might mean embracing the darkness, and that just might be the most dangerous thing of all. So this feels like it might actually have some like horror vibes going on. I'm still calling it a fantasy. I'm very intrigued to read this one. And then the final book I have for this video, If the Shoe Fits by Julie Murphy. This is an author who has written a lot of books with that girl protagonists, most notably the Dumplin series. So this author has written a lot. Why am I yellow? What is this? What is happening? So this author does have like some popular titles under her belt already dealing with subject matter of weight. This book, first of all, I love the cover. It's just so cute. This is a Cinderella retelling. So we follow Cindy, who loves shoes. See, I don't think this is young adult. It was shelved in the young adult section, and this author author has written young adult books before, but our main character just finished getting her degree. You don't get a degree when you're in your teens, so is this actually new adult? I don't know. So she's just got a design degree, but she doesn't have a job, so she moves back in with her stepmother. Her name is Erica Tremaine. It's kind of a fun throwback because if you don't know, in the Disney animated Cinderella, the evil stepmother is called Lady Tremaine. So we love the references. Anyway, so her stepmother is the executive producer of the world's biggest reality dating show, Before Midnight. We love the parallels. I love a retelling. There is a last minute absence and they need to fill in a slot on the show, and suddenly Cindy is thrust into the limelight on a reality TV show. She sees it as an opportunity to showcase her designer shoes and stuff. You're in the limelight on public TV, the only fat girl on the show. Like, that's a lot to take in. Being the first and only plus size contestant turns her into a viral sensation and a body positivity icon overnight. And she's also kind of falling for the Prince Charming guy, you know, because Cinderella. It says to make it to the end despite the backhanded compliments, conniving producers, and a house full of fellow contestants she's not sure she can trust. Cindy will have to take a leap of faith and hope her heels and her heart don't break in the process. I like the tagline up the top here. It says, if the shoe doesn't fit, maybe it's time to design your own. I'm very excited to read this one. I love a fairy tale retelling. And to read a Cinderella story where Cinderella is fat, that does something to me, because Cinderella is supposed to be the picture of beauty and poise and grace. So everything you are taught as a fat individual that you are not. I'm very excited about this. I'm excited about all of them because I don't read very many books with fat girl protagonists, which is what inspired me to want to make this video. So I will be reading these 4 books and then I will come back to you after I finish each book and give like a proper review, and then we will do a thoughts and feelings at the end where I discuss exactly what I'm taking away from this experience, which I don't even know what that could be at this point, honestly, but we will find out together. And I hope you guys stick around to see how this goes. Yeah, we're gonna get going. You'll see me again when I have something to say about at least one of them. When I hold this up, it makes me go real yellow. Hello again. So, I finished If the Shoe Fits by Julie Murphy, and I loved it. I absolutely adored this. I gave it a 5 out of 5. It's probably more like a 4.5, but I've rounded it up. I loved this. This was so well done. This is a Cinderella retelling, and it is very clearly inspired by the Disney animated Cinderella. Like, oh my god, the references. Yeah, there are so many little Easter eggs and references in this book. It's great. I would highly recommend this if you like Cinderella and if you get a kick out of retellings, because this was done well. I really enjoyed the development of these two's relationship. The one thing I have to say about this book that isn't great is the ending was a little bit super rushed. We were trotting along at a good pace, everything was going really well, and then suddenly it just zoomed through and it didn't feel right. I wanted it to explain more and to give more answers than it did. Now, I loved this. I love the discussion of the fashion industry, especially in a book that is specifically commenting on size. This book never once felt preachy in a way some books can. Like, it wasn't constantly laboring the point of inclusion or exclusion. It was just that it was a factor that kept coming up. It didn't feel like it was constantly shoving it in my face that Cindy was fat, or that the fashion industry often didn't, you know, think of that. It was just a thing that came up every now and then, and so it didn't get irritating. It became more of just a thing you were aware of. So this is a Cinderella retelling set on a dating show called Before Midnight. Cindy is the only plus size contestant on the show. One thing I really appreciated about this book as well is that it wasn't like everyone went, ooh, that girl, oh my god. It wasn't overdoing it. The catty comments and underhanded behaviors and attitudes that she had to deal with and experience were a lot more natural and realistic feeling to what it is like in the real world today. I figured out while reading this, by the way, it's not YA. It's shelved in the YA section in the bookstore, and it does read kind of like a YA, but our protagonist is 22. So it's not really YA. I don't know what it is at that point, maybe new new adult, but it's not like it's overly sexual or anything, so I don't know. I would also like to point out I am 22, so I'm the exact same age as Cindy, so I really felt the connection. I loved Cindy as a character. I really loved seeing her in this position. The fat girl in the book is the princess of the story, but she's also strong-willed and independent. She's struggling with her life, but also she's the one who has to figure it out. You know, no one's rescuing her despite the fact that she's a princess in the story. I mean, she's not an actual princess. I just mean in the sense of the retelling. So I really liked that. I loved seeing a fat girl as a... It sounds bad, but I want to say as a viable option for a typically attractive male, because you never see that pairing. So I did like that, and I'm not saying I don't think Cindy's attractive. I think she probably is. I mean, I can't see her, but I still think she is. I loved some of the comments that were throughout this book. There were some one-liners that just... Someone called her a cow and she said, "Moo bitch, moo," and I want that on a shirt. There was a lot of good conversation in this around the fashion industry because Cindy is really into design. She wants to design footwear specifically, but she's interested in design as a whole, fashion design. And there's a lot of discussion about how fashion is kind of made exclusive for certain people, even though clothes are something that need to be worn by all, and how that makes no sense. And fashion should be more inclusive. Like, why don't we get the same stuff? There was so much good conversation in here and I loved it, and I loved Cindy. I really enjoyed Julie Murphy's writing of Cindy because Cindy is a fat girl, yes, but she's also just like a normal girl. She eats, you know. This author wasn't afraid to write Cindy eating and making food. It's like an unspoken rule is that the fat character can only eat if it's a point. Julie Murphy said, actually no, people eat. I don't know why, but I'd never even made the connection that I'd never seen that in a neutral like expression, but apparently I haven't because it caught me off guard. She's sarcastic and witty, but she's not bitter, and she's also not a big fan of running, but it's not then this big thing that she can't run because she's fat. Like it's just a not thing, and she does run in various situations where she has to run. It's not like she can't. And I really liked this book, to be quite honest with you. I think it did a fantastic job with the fat rep, and I also just loved it as a story, and I loved all the characters. I loved that in the relationship that was developing here with Cindy and Henry, neither of them seemed to give a shit that she was fat. Obviously she didn't. She's quite happy with herself, you know, she thinks she looks great and I love her for it. But Henry also thinks she looks great. He doesn't in any way fetishize her size, but he also doesn't ever even blink about anything. Like, he doesn't care. He thinks she is attractive and desirable, and it's not despite she's fat, and it's not because she's fat. It is irrelevant. We're starting this off strong. I am so happy that I've read this book. As a fat girl, this book did it, and it did it well. I feel like this was everything I was hoping to find in this video, and it was the first book I read, so I really hope that we continue on this height, but I'll come back when I've read the next one. But I loved this. This is one of my favorite books of the year. So it's been a hot minute. It's been like maybe a week since I last talked to you guys. I finished this book like a week ago. When I planned to do this video, I forgot that I had an exam. So I had to stop everything that I was doing and, you know, study for and do the exam. And that was just... We're not talking about that. What we are talking about is this book, Teach Me by Olivia Dade. The second book I read for this video. Y'all, I wanted to love this. I wanted to love it so bad. I gave this book 2 stars. Now listen, objectively, I think this is probably 3-star in quality. I just personally didn't click with it. So this is an adult romance novel following 2 teachers who've both had some struggles in the past, especially with relationships, and they kind of come together and help each other to love themselves and trust other people more. It's a whole thing. I had 2 main gripes with this book. The first being, it was kind of boring. I felt like nothing happened. This book is very short. It's like 260 pages or so, and it covers an entire year, an entire school year. And the content of this book and the development of the characters within this book, I'm like, okay, maybe 3 months. Maybe. But there is no way it took a year for all of this stuff to happen. And there was also no real signifier of the time changing. There were a couple of times where they talked about holidays, and there were a couple of times where they mentioned something specific to a school year, like a prom or testing of some kind, but they were things that I'm very unfamiliar with, having not gone through the American school system, so that didn't really help with anything. And my other main problem with this book, which is entirely on me and not at all anything against the book itself, is the fact that the characters are in their late 40s. And there is something very unsettling to me as a 22-year-old reading about people in their late 40s coming up on 50 getting it on, for lack of a better term. It was very unsettling. Like, I read a lot of romance books. I never considered myself an ageist person when it comes to romance books, but I guess the oldest kind of characters I come across in those types of scenarios are in their 30s, and I don't know why this makes a difference, but it felt very uncomfortable. I was like, these people are the age of my teachers and like my parents and uncles and aunts and like that generation, not my generation, not the one just a bit above me. Like, you've gone too far. It makes me feel weird. I've never felt genuinely uncomfortable reading a sex scene before. I did here. I think that's saying something. Now, again, I'm not saying that that's a problem with this book. That was a problem with me choosing this book. And I don't think this is a problem every 22-year-old is going to experience if they want to read this. Just me. It's a very personal matter that I didn't like that element. And I feel bad that I didn't like that element, because how ageist of me. People in their 40s deserve to have romance books out there, and they deserve to have intimate romance books out there. So I think it's good that this book does that. I just personally should not have picked this up. Both of these teachers, Martin and Rose, sorry, it's been a while since I actually read this, teach high school students who are in their year of graduation. I related so much stronger to B, Martin's daughter, and these students who are scattered throughout the story than I did Martin and Rose. I wanted to read about the teenagers, not the teachers. Again, that's definitely a fault on me for picking this book. But anyway, the point of this is talking about fat rep. Honestly, there wasn't really any. Like, obviously there was, because Rose is a fat woman, but it isn't really a thing. No one brings it up, really. There's a couple times where she says something that reflects on the experience of being a fat woman, but honestly, it's just not even, it's a non-thing in this book, which in some ways I appreciated, because it shouldn't always be a thing. But then when they did bring it up, it's like they brought it up just to remind us, or just to try and click into that body positivity vibe without actually, I don't want to say deserving it, because that's a bit harsh. Again, I think it's great that there is a book out there, and I'm sure there are many books out there, but I'm glad that this book is out there where our protagonist, or one of our protagonists, is a fat woman, and the fact that she's fat is completely irrelevant to every single thing in the book. It's like a non-thing, and I do appreciate that. I think that there need to be more books out there where there are different body types, where it's not the point of the book, or the book doesn't feel the need to be some kind of commentary. While yes, that's one of the things I loved the most about If the Shoe Fits by Julie Murphy, I can also appreciate that not every book with fat protagonists needs to be about the fact that they're fat. In fact, I would argue that that is incredibly important, that not every book about fat protagonists is about the fact that they're fat, because then it becomes a gimmick. Then it becomes a commodity instead of an identity. I appreciate this book for that element, and I recognize the ways in which this book could work for so many people and just didn't for me. There were some pitfalls in this book in terms of the pacing. As I said, the whole year span, just, I feel like that was way too long, and I didn't really have a good sense of time passing. I didn't get emotionally invested. I wasn't a fan of this book, and I don't want to get too stuck on the characters' ages, because I don't think that's really why I didn't like it. I think it's an element towards my general feelings towards it, yes, but I think even regardless of that, this book would have been a 2 or maybe 3 star romance for me, but I'm definitely putting it at a 2. Again, I think the fat rep being just that she's fat and it has no other impact. Like, it's just the same amount of difference as if she was actually blonde instead of brunette. Like, no one would care. It's just a part of her physical description. I really enjoyed that. As I said before, I think it's important that we have the stories that do that don't decide to focus on it as such an innate must be discussed thing. Sometimes I think it needs to be discussed. Sometimes I think it just needs to be accepted. And in this book I really got the vibe that it was just accepted because she's a person and this is what people are like and no one cares. I did appreciate that. I felt like the characters were pretty flat. Even the other characters, all the side characters, were very two-dimensional. I feel like I didn't really get to know them in any meaningful way. This book really just didn't vibe with me, and it's sad because I wanted it to. But yeah, that's my really fun thoughts on the matter. I'm gonna move on to the next book for this video, and hopefully I can get this done by next week, because my god, I have already had to push this video out a week, but hopefully we get this done. My hair is very fluffy today. So I have now read A Darkened Stylus Forest by Sarah Hollowell. I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. I really actually quite enjoyed this. I wasn't too sure at the start. It was giving me weird vibes and I felt a little bit detached from the characters and everything that was happening, and then I just got sucked in. So this book follows a girl named Derry, who is kind of like an adopted sibling of a group of 9 girls who are being taken care of by this guy named Frank in this house in the middle of the woods, and he is protecting them and training them because they have magical abilities, and if they leave the house and go back out into the real world, they won't be accepted, they'll be shunned, they'll likely be killed because witches. And then one day one of Derry's sisters goes walking into the forest and never comes back, and slowly her sisters start disappearing and she has to figure out how to save them by going into this forest, and it's developing her powers but maybe in a more sinister way. I don't know how to explain this book. I'm trying not to say anything that's not in the synopsis because there are quite a few twists in this book that some I saw coming, some I did not. One thing I'll say about this book is that it is pitched as being a contemporary fantasy, and like it is, it's set in our world in modern day and there's definitely fantastical elements, but I would call this book a horror more than anything else. I would say this is a horror book. I would say it's a fantastical horror because this book is creepy. The atmosphere throughout this book is just fantastic. It really had me on edge. This book gives serious cult vibes, but like it's not a cult. It's just you have this feeling that something is very wrong right from the start, and things just get so intense throughout this book. It is so good. So our fat girl protagonist in this book is Derry. She is one of 9 sisters. For the most part they're not actually related. There are 2 sets of twins. Other than that they're all kind of like a patchwork family. So we have Derry, and I think about 3 of the other girls are overweight. We have 2 asexual characters, we have a trans character, we have a non-binary character, we have multiple characters of color, black characters and Hispanic characters, as well as white characters, Derry herself being one of them. There is other queer rep. I know Derry and at least a couple of the other girls are attracted to women or girls. Sounds weird to say women when they're like young teens. I don't know if they're lesbian or bi or pan or what. I don't know if it actually told me that in the book or not, but this is not like a romance to any degree. This is a really intense story, but it focuses a lot on family and sisterhood and a bond that exists among these girls, and I really loved seeing that. A lot of books like this would take the opportunity to have the girls going against each other, and so I'm really glad that this book didn't go down that route. I really enjoyed it. The fact that Derry is fat, similar to Teach Me, isn't a huge plot point or really much of a discussion point either in this book. It's just a thing. It's just a part of her physical description, and so there are a couple times where it comes into play because a certain space or thing isn't designed for her body, but not really. It's not a point of the book, and I really appreciated that, especially because this is a different genre. So it's really nice that an author went, hey, you know those creepy horror fantasy books? They can have fat protagonists and it doesn't have to change anything. So I really enjoyed that. As I said, there was a little bit of detachment at the start. It took me a minute to get into it, but once I got sucked in, I was sucked, and I read most of this book in one sitting. I do think this book has done a slight disservice in the fact that it's not really marketed as a horror, because I think it should be. It's a horror as much as, if not more so, than something like The Gracier by Kim Leger. That book is marketed as horror. This one should 100% be marketed as horror. It is tagged as horror on Goodreads, but it's like the 7th tag through or something. And I think pitching this as a contemporary fantasy kind of gives people the wrong idea of the vibe and atmosphere and tone of the book, because it's definitely got that eerie, kind of creepy, unsettling thing going on the whole way through. I found the magic in this book so fascinating. It wasn't entirely unique, but it was still really interesting. The forest was a very creepy concept, but I liked it. I really don't want to say too much about this book because I don't want to give away anything that happens in here. Just know that it's really good. It's not one I'm gonna forget anytime soon. As I said, the fat rep in this book is more that it's a story that happens to have a fat girl as the protagonist. It's not an integral part of the story. Derry very easily could have been thin and it wouldn't have changed anything, and I think that's just as important. As I was saying with the last book that I read, it is so important that we show that these roles and these stories and archetypes and plots can happen to fat girls too. It's not a exclusive thing, and you're not tied to specific plots if you're a fat girl. And I think that this book did a very good job of just, here's a story, she happens to be fat, but it doesn't really matter. But yeah, I loved this book. I really hope more people pick it up. It didn't come out too long ago. Yeah, it only came out last year, and I did see a couple people talk about it at one point, but I haven't heard about it in a while. I really liked this, so I'm hoping that I really enjoy the last book I have for this video and that we can have good vibes, all the good vibes. Did it! I finished the last book for this video. So I just finished reading this, Fat Chance Charlie Vega by Crystal Maldonado. I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars, but it's more like a 3.75, but rounding. This follows a girl named Charlie in high school. She is fat and half Puerto Rican. It's just kind of about her experiences, mostly in regards to being fat, and it's specifically talking about her relationship with her mother and her best friend Amelia, whom she feels incredibly inferior to. She feels like she's always the second choice after Amelia, and it kind of delves into a tentative romantic situation with this guy named Brian from her school, and it's a book all about self-love and learning to see yourself as beautiful and the journey of self-acceptance and self-love that some people have to go through. I really enjoyed this book. I thought that it was a very realistic expression of the fat experience in high school. Obviously everyone's experience is different. I really enjoyed Charlie as a character. I think I really kind of match with her quite well. She loves writing. She has a lot of insecurities, but she's also a pretty strong-willed individual, and she's kind of a loud person, not in the sense that she's always making a lot of noise or whatever, but in that she does talk. You know, she might not always know what to say, but she does say something. And this kind of struggle she's going through in this book about her self-acceptance and her body image, and also the tension that exists between her and the other women in her life, felt very familiar. Obviously I don't have the same relationships as Charlie. I think my mum is rather supportive of me, and she definitely doesn't treat me the way Charlie's mum treats her, but there are some select instances where I'm like, oh, this is a bit close for comfort. There's a lot of fat shaming in this book. Charlie's best friend Amelia was great. I love the tension in their relationship as well, because it kind of came from a different place. I don't really want to talk about all the specifics of this because spoilers, you know, we're not about that. Also, I would just like to point out something that is mentioned in the synopsis of this book is a reveal in the book about this close to the end. I don't know why they do that. I really enjoyed seeing the development of Charlie's relationship with Brian and seeing the ways that they interacted with each other and expressed interest in each other and having a fat body displayed in a romantic or sexual way or viewed as attractive and wanted was really nice. I did like that. I think if this book had been around when I was in high school, I would have really loved it and gotten a lot out of it, because there's a lot of discussion in here about trying to maneuver in the world as a fat girl. I think it's really well done. It's exploring it in a very realistic way. Like, Charlie is a very body positive person in general. She likes the body positivity movement, she supports it, but she still struggles with her relationship with her own body. And I think specifically as a teenager, that is something that can be really hard to grapple with, to try and really fully accept yourself as you are and love yourself as you are for things that you can very easily appreciate in other people. You know, it's very different when you apply it to yourself. And seeing her struggles and her journey with her own body was quite almost validating in a way. There was also a lot of discussion in this book about the constant comparisons that happen. Like, as a woman, you are always kind of compared to other women. It's just the way the world is, and it's awful and needs to change. But as a fat woman, you are often compared to women who are not fat. And that thing is always like a blinking red light of here's a thing, here's a thing. It was really nice to see Charlie's personal experiences with her weight and with her body as not a cut and dry thing. It's something that she really does struggle with. She doesn't know how to get to a point where she's happy with herself. It was so good to read, and I think as a teenager who was fat, I would have gotten a lot out of this. There's also discussion of feeling like you're falling behind and not knowing if it's because of your weight or because of other things. Charlie is 16 at the start of this book, and she's never had a boyfriend, never had a mutual liking situation going on, and she's never been kissed, and she feels like she doesn't know if it's because she's fat and therefore undesirable, or if there's something else. And that was, honestly, I felt seen. I had a very similar situation in that regard, so I definitely understood her feelings there, where you feel like for some reason you can't progress in that realm. And I don't know how much of it is because of the way you actually look, or if it's the way you feel about the way you look. There were a lot of really touching scenes in here of Charlie at different points where she was getting really angry or really upset, or even moments where she was feeling really good about herself and then it would just all come crashing down. Those kinds of roller coaster experiences and emotions, I really enjoyed seeing them put here, because not only does that bring these things to the surface and illustrate them in a way that people who don't experience them themselves can see and understand, it also does validate those feelings in people who are going through it, because no one talks about it. You become someone who avoids a lot of people. Charlie doesn't have a lot of friends or people who are close to her in this book, because she's kind of closed herself off because of her own insecurities. And I'm not saying her insecurities are unfounded. They are insecurities that throughout my life I have also had, which I think is why I so enjoyed seeing them here. It really showcased what this experience is for so many people. So this was another book where the fat girl protagonist being fat was integral to the plot, and it was a huge point of discussion and contention. And I think there was a lot of good discussion in here, and I think this book would be very important for a lot of young fat girls to see themselves represented, to see themselves as desirable enough to have boyfriends and partners and whatever, and to know that, you know, you get to have your stories too. And there was a lot of discussion in this book about weight loss and body shaming, and how those two things are quite often interconnected. I really liked this one. 4 out of 5 stars. Would recommend it. It's time to go into my final thoughts segment of this video. So over the course of what ended up being about 2.5, 3 weeks, listen, things got out of hand. I had an exam and procrastinated. I read 4 books with fat girl protagonists. I read If the Shoe Fits by Julie Murphy, Teach Me by Olivia Dade, A Darkened Stylus Forest by Sarah Hollowell, and Fat Chance Charlie Vega by Crystal Maldonado. I had a pretty fun experience reading all these books. I ended up giving out a variety of ratings. We had a 2-star, 2 4-stars, and a 5-star read from this, and I had a fun experience. It was really fun to actually read read a bunch of protagonists to at least some degree I could relate to. I definitely saw myself reflected in these books in different instances, and I shared a lot of experiences that these characters went through or struggles that they've had to deal with, and I really appreciated that, and feeling seen and feeling validated that my experience and my life and my body type are valid protagonists for interesting books. So I definitely enjoyed this process. I think it was a lot of fun reading about a lot of characters who are like me. Another thing that I really appreciated, I'm pretty sure all of them, I don't have a picture of Olivia Dade, so I could be wrong on that front, but I believe all of the authors for these books are fat women or larger women. I don't want to be that person who decides everyone wants to use the word fat, because I know not everybody does. And so these experiences and these portrayals and these depictions definitely felt more authentic, and I could really feel the good intentions, and I felt like I was being seen, not commodified, which is a whole other discussion. I'm not saying people who aren't fat shouldn't write fat characters. That's definitely not the case. I think everybody should write fat characters because there should be fat characters in everything. I think it helped with my experiences throughout this video, reading these books and enjoying them and connecting so much with the fat representation, the fact that the authors were likely drawing from real experiences and real feelings. I think that's probably one of the reasons why I connected so hard and didn't find any of them offensive. I would recommend all of these, even though I only gave Teach Me 2 stars. I think other people would like it more than me. That book really didn't click with me very well, but if it sounds like something you think you'll enjoy, I would still recommend giving it a read. This also just goes to show that books can be written with fat protagonists and still be good books, so that needs to happen more often, please. Thank you, publishing houses. I think I deserve to see myself represented. I think it shouldn't have been such a struggle for me to come up with a list of books to read for this video. That girl protagonists should definitely be in more genres. You shouldn't have to read a specific genre of book to be able to see yourself represented. That's such bullshit. I tried to have different genres, but realistically I only had 2. These are 3 different age categories. We have an adult romance, a new adult romance, and a young adult romance / contemporary realistic fiction, but like that's all still one genre, just for different age ranges. And then we had a young adult fantasy horror book. I would like to potentially one day redo this concept and have more than 4 books and a multitude of genres. You know, I'd like to read a sci-fi, a dystopian, middle grade. You know, I'd like to be able to have more genres than this where I can see myself. But overall, I would call this a good experience, and I hope I was able to provide you guys with some recommendations of books with fat protagonists if that's what you're looking for. Please, if you have any, leave them down below, both for myself and anyone else watching this video. I would love to have some recommendations of books with fat protagonists. I think that would be amazing, and not just fat girl protagonists, although that was the focus of this video. I would like to see fat protagonists of every gender identity represented, but for now, this is what I did in this video. I think it went pretty well. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video and subscribe if you want to see more from me. I post every single week, so there's more where this came from, and I hope to see you guys next time in a new video. Bye!